Hello BookTube, I'm Jonathan and welcome to Words in Time. Now in today's video we're going to be talking about Foundation and Empire by Isaac Asimov, which is the second book in the Foundation series. Not Second Foundation, that's the third book, which does sound a bit silly when you say it like that, but Second Foundation doesn't refer to the order of the books, it refers to the mysterious Second Foundation within the story's universe. So, what is the premise of Foundation and Empire? This is a spoiler-free review, so not going to be giving away spoilers for this one, and I'm going to try not to spoil too much of the first one either. So whether you've read the first one or you haven't, stick around for this review, find out what I think about the series as a whole, a bit more than just the first, and also if you're watching the new TV series, let me know. This might reveal whether there's perhaps some good material for the writers to work off down the road. So, this book is split into two stories. Foundation had 5 short stories. Foundation and Empire has 2 that are a little bit longer. So the first story is called The General. And the premise of The General is that essentially the Foundation has been getting stronger, whereas the Empire has been getting weaker. And a general of the Empire decides he wants to attack the Foundation. And there are 2 guests of the General that realize, hey, if this war starts, we're going to be viewed as enemies. We might need to escape and maybe try and put a stop to this. So that's the premise for The General. That's set about 40 years in the future from the events in Foundation. Then we skip another 100 years into the future with The Mule, the name of the second story, and also the name of a character which we get introduced to in this story. And The Mule is a mutant, kind of like an X-Man type character. His ability is that he can control other people's emotions. So it's not quite mind control, but if I could make you love me, you're probably going to do what I ask you to do. And if I can make you hate someone else, perhaps my enemy, I can make them your enemy as well. So a very strong power. As I said in my Foundation review, a strength of the series is the power dynamics, the politics, trying to get other people to do what you want them to do. Well, the Mule's pretty good at that. And we also follow some other characters that are citizens of the Foundation, and they are trying to locate the mysterious Second Foundation. They say, this Mule guy, we're going to need some help. We're going to need some help with this. So they're on a mission to track down the Second Foundation. So there you go. There's the setup for the 2 stories in Foundation and Empire. To dig into the structure and the story a little bit more without spoilers, I would have thought that with only 2 stories, perhaps things would flow a bit more, it'd feel a bit less disjointed than the original might have for some people. But I actually felt more disjointed to me, because even though there were quite a few stories in the first book, things flowed together. There were effects that you could see from one to the next. Whereas in The General, obviously the universe is derived from the original, but the story and the characters felt very isolated. It wasn't connected to anything that was going on and didn't really have a direct impact on the Mule either. The larger story at play did a little bit, but the plot elements and the characters didn't really continue on. And then the Mule, it wasn't derived from anything that happened in The General, and we'll have to see how much it connects to the Second Foundation, the third book in the trilogy. So that might not bother you. I just wanted a little bit more flow, a little bit more connection, whereas these felt a little bit isolated. Now, with longer stories, you would think they might be able to develop, Isaac Asimov might have been able to develop the characters a bit more, because one of my minor critiques of Foundation, a book that I really enjoyed, was that some of the characters were a bit thin. Not all of them were that well developed. So let's get into each of the stories. The General, I really like the premise. I think this is a good setup, an interesting setup, an opportunity for those power dynamics to play, those political factions to go back and forth, which was done really well in the first book. But it felt like a short story that had been stretched out to half a novel. To me, I felt like the characters were still quite thin. I wasn't super invested in them. And the outcome, the ending was a little anticlimactic for me. I mentioned in my Foundation review that I loved how Asimov sets up problems. There's always issues for the characters to solve with big stakes at play. But some of the solutions seemed a little simple, or the explanation seemed a little thin. This seemed like an example of Deus Ex Machina to me. I'm not going to give the specifics, but an equivalent would be me trying to get my brother in trouble, saying, "Hey, Mum, Brian did something he wasn't supposed to." And Mum being like, "Okay, Brian, go to your room." And Brian's like, "Hey, I didn't do that." And I'm like, "Ha, I outwitted and outplayed you, Brian." And you're like, "Okay, I mean, I guess." I'm being silly, of course, to try and prove a point. You might have thought that the elements came together in a bit of a clever way than I did, but for whatever reason, it just didn't really hit for me. But moving on to the mule, we have some more characters that we get to spend some time with that are even less interesting. I don't know if I was perhaps a bit tired or a bit of a bad mood when I was reading this story, but I did not care for these characters at all. I did not really connect with the citizens of the Foundation. I think they were at best boring and at worst irritating. I'm not sure, maybe it was just me. So this is starting to sound like a bit of a negative review, but the characters of Magnifico and the Mule are probably the best characters in the whole series. That was a really strong element of this story, definitely a redeeming factor. And let me tell you why I like Magnifico. Magnifico is a clown, a jester, that worked for the Mule and has escaped him and was mistreated by the Mule. And so he is a quite sad but very endearing and interesting character. And there is a scene, a chapter, where he plays a musical instrument that is called the Visisonor. I might not have pronounced that correctly, but it is a musical instrument that not only produces sounds, but also images and conveys emotions directly to you as it is played. And that chapter is not only a highlight of the story, but one of the highlights of the whole series. I think it is an emotional scene, but also a wonderful sci-fi technological creation. Definitely worth reading, almost just for that chapter alone. If you don't read the book, go look up that one. I'm sure you can find it online, it's pretty cool. So why did I like the Mule as well? Well, the Mule has very interesting powers. He's an interesting wrench into the Selden plan, because Harry Selden's psychohistory, the setup of Foundation, relies on these mathematics, sociological analyses, projecting the trajectory of society as a whole. It doesn't need to predict the actions of individual people, because no one person can impact the trajectory of society. Or can they? Because the Mule basically has superpowers. So that calls into question, well, is this something that Selden predicted? And is this something the Foundation can stop? So that's another great problem. Asimov's great at throwing problems at us, the readers, at the characters in the book. And the Mule is a mighty problem to solve. And he's a welcome villain too. I think in some of the earlier stories, the opposition was more political forces or disagreements of opinion, whereas the Mule is a clear villain, at least from the perspective of the Foundation. So I really, really like that. So bringing all of these together, what did I think of the ending? What did I think of the book as a whole? Well, the Mule ends a bit stronger than the General. There is a reveal, there is a payoff. My only minor complaint is that the plot plays out through more exposition, not a lot of action in this one either. And as I said in reviewing Foundation, a lot of people talking in rooms. That's okay, I don't need the action as long as those discussions are interesting. And I felt like some of them were, some of them weren't, but it did pick up towards the end of the story. So this is a tough one to give a rating to, because the highs were very high, but there were a lot of periods which were just middle of the road for me in terms of my own level of personal enjoyment. So I'm going to give Foundation and Empire a 6.5 out of 10. It's definitely a good book, definitely worth reading. just for me, it was a little bit of a personal letdown, or just not quite what I expected or hoped for after Foundation, which I really, really enjoyed. But I don't want to put you off continuing the series. I might be in the minority on this one. This does have a pretty high rating on Goodreads, 4.21. So everyone might not feel that way. They might have connected to the characters a little bit more. They might have found the solutions to the problems a little bit more clever or satisfying. But yes, still enjoyed it primarily because of the Mule and Magnifico. So we'll see. There's one more to go in the original trilogy, which I have read. Second Foundation. We'll see if the series comes home strong with that one. So there you go, guys. Let me know, have you read Foundation and Empire or any of the other books in the Foundation series? Let me know what you think. How did you rate it? How did you enjoy it? And if not, are you interested in picking it up? And if you started watching the show, what did you think of the first few episodes that have been released? So, as always, guys, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. And second Foundation coming soon, as well as other sci-fi book reviews, ranking lists, and all that sci-fi goodness coming soon.